Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome into another edition of Infection Podcast. My name is Nick Craig. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig. And, of course, visit our website, infectionpodcast.com. Joining me as he does each and every week from his current location, Brian with an I, Aldridge. Hello, Brian. Hope all is well.
Yeah, we're closing on the house tomorrow. So
Excellent.
then the day after that, we're getting the fiber installed. And I mean, I'm sure by next show I'll have all of this. I may not have the green screen. I'm sure I probably will, but we'll get all.
I think here. We'll survive. Where can people find you online?
Well, if you want to find me, get me at Boise Computer on X.com, or you can go to at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, Truth Social, whichever one of those. And, of course, all the normal ways. Discord. Just go to Discord, and if you want to get a hold of Nick and I, that seems to be the proper place.
That is a good place. I want to start off here with Starfield, Brian, a game that I will admit I have not had the time to fully delve into. Just busy time of year around election season for me. But this, just to show, I think this headline, I'm going to read the headline. It's something I do on my radio show a lot, and I talk about it. Read the headline. I think there's two different stories here. The headline over at GameIndustry.biz, by the way, great website. Starfield helps boost U.S. games revenue 10% in September. Two takeaways. First, Starfield, rave success, great game. Secondly, video game industry on the decline, one single game can boost the revenue 10% in 1 month. I think both of those things can exist in the same sphere.
Well, and there's one thing I kind of want to touch on as we're talking about this. Starfield on the Game Pass, a majority of the people didn't pay for it, yet it upped the revenue of the whole game industry by 10%.
I forgot that it was on Game Pass.
Yeah, so it's on Game Pass, so a lot of people didn't have to pay for it.
Now, but hold on, and I have nothing to back this up, but I'm going to say it anyway. Similar to what I do on my radio show.
Unsubstantiated, yes. Let's go.
But okay, so it's a little bit different for a game like Starfield because it is Bethesda, but which they own. But it's still but it's still a company. So so if you play similar to like when you watch something on Netflix or stream a song on Spotify, there are royalties paid to the artist, or in the case of a television show, the production company, whoever owns the licensing and rights to it. They have to be doing something similar with Game Pass. You're not just signing over your game for nothing. It's probably a royalty based on it. So I would not be surprised if those sales figures do not include some of the Game Pass streams, because it's not free. Bethesda can't make the game for free and then Microsoft not pay them something in royalties. Again, I know it's the same company, but even in business, you would pay yourself, even if it's not.
Okay, so but with this one, it's not quite that. Here's what really made this one just go all out for spending. The add-on. So you got the base game for free.
Sure.
And then they offered that you could upgrade your version of the Game Pass one up to one of the other editions, like $35 for the premium edition upgrade. That's what did it for them. So not even selling the game, they got 10%. So because they own it, they're not making a royalty. It's more of an incentive for them to get people on the Game Pass, but there's no way for them to really show that other than, this sold and maybe we had an increase of Game Pass, subscriptions by this much. This one had an incredible amount of sales of the add-on premium edition upgrade. That it was huge, and that was what boosted their sales. And that was just a $35 add-on. I have this other article from Kotaku, the Bastion of Truth, where they said Starfield just busted the biggest myth about Xbox Game Pass, because this is something that we've heard over and over again is, the Game Pass is just killing studios and making it to where they're not really, making money in the way they should. When they put it on Game Pass, sure, they get this flat fee, to get on there and whatever. But they showed how you can do it. Make a game that is really look forward to, put in some things to get you those premium edition upgrades, and then guess what? If you eventually take it off, now this one I doubt is ever going to leave Game Pass, so it's fairly safe. Well, let's say the game leaves Game Pass, then you get all these people buying the base edition so that their premium upgrade still works. Because I assume that will break that upgrade if it ever leaves the Game Pass.
Sure. Now, there's a couple of interesting things as I skimmed through this Kotaku article. They're already trying to downplay Starfield, of course, because it's a Microsoft product, so it should be burned. But they note that obviously first month game sales you would expect to be high because not everybody, I would even argue a vast majority of players are not playing on Game Pass. But as the game gets 3 and 6 and 9 months out from its release, you'll see less sales in all likelihood because more people will be playing it on Game Pass when they're looking at this game 3, 6, 9 months after its release. But again, for Microsoft, this isn't really a problem. It's their game. They've made big time money on it. And there's going to be DLC. People will be able to buy that stuff. And to me, it doesn't seem like it's going to be too detrimental to them. Now, if you're an outside Microsoft studio, I'd have questions about this, right? If your game's available day one on Game Pass and it's not a Microsoft game, I wonder what that looks like.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard that they get a fee to put it on the Game Pass.
So probably a significant heavy upfront fee.
Yes, and this is kind of a safe bet for these studios who, depending on what game might come out at the same time as them, sometimes there's games that are reasonably decent games. They're not trash games that come out and just the timing is bad. They come out when there's another game that people have been really looking forward to, and their game barely sells, and it kind of dwindles away and never gets the fire that it deserved. This is a good way for studios to prevent that. If you want to make sure that your employees are getting paid, that you're going to get a base set of people that actually play your game. For instance, look at how many online multiplayer games that we've seen that just don't have enough people to support the game. Not enough people on day one bought it to make the game feel how it's supposed to feel. Well, how do you solve that? You put it on Game Pass, you get a ton of people playing it, you get guaranteed money to keep your things going, and then start working on your next DLC or whatever that you can add on to that people have the Game Pass to keep that funding going. Because there's not really a subscription model for Game Pass, but I think as long as they keep it on there, I think there is an ongoing type of a payment. So you're guaranteed to be making money when a lot of these games, especially right now in the economy that we've talked about week after week, there's so many studios that can't keep going because they don't have that funding. Game Pass kind of guarantees that, as long as I'm sure that it maybe changes over time based on usage, but at least it guarantees that you're going to get an income to keep your developers hired to continue making improvements and bug fixes on the game. Because that's something I think we've seen. Some studios can't even do that. Like the game just kind of gets dumped and no longer gets any kind of updates after a couple of months because it didn't get the draw that they were expecting, and they don't have enough to keep their developers hired or artists hired or whoever they consider extra. So I think it's a good thing. People like to kind of bash Game Pass. Kotaku, they kind of do a little side swipe here and there, but I don't think that's a relevant criticism because for some studios, it makes sense.
Well, you look at this, this is for the month of September. You've got 3 new games within the top here. Starfield, the new Mortal Kombat, no longer called FIFA anymore, EA Sports Football Club 24 because they gave FIFA the middle finger on that. Payday 3, NBA 2K24. I don't know what the asterisk digital sales not included for that one. Okay. And then the Crew the Motorfest. So, I mean, you've had some pretty big games coming out in the new month. I find it amazing to me that October of the month prior to this, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the 2022 edition, was the number 4th ranked game. Kind of shows you how slow the video game industry has been this year.
Well, look at Hogwarts Legacy. I mean, how long ago did that thing come out? That thing was number 5 last month.
Yeah.
And number 9. It's only number 5 because new games came out.
Push it
down the list.
Yeah. And I think that shows how the two things I mentioned at the top of the show. It shows, one, that this game is really good, and two, the video game industry is struggling. It's probably not the right word to use, but it is. It's in a little bit of a lull right now. It's not
depressed. I mean, if you want to give it, I mean, it's in somewhat of a depression of the game industry. Studios are having to cut back. Costs have skyrocketed. I mean, it's kind of like the food industry. If you look at costs have skyrocketed. And you know what? People have to eat, but people don't have to play games. If people could go with every other meal and still be just as satisfied, they would. But you know what? People have to eat every day.
True, and I'm not discounting your depressed term, but I'd like to also say that not every month are you getting new hot video games. There are some months.
Seems like for a while we were.
Well, yeah, but again, I think we were pretty insulated in that, Brian, in the new hot games that we were getting. Minus Conan Exiles, when you look at these other games that were coming out, these weren't popular games. They were popular within our very small niche of the internet, and everybody was talking about them, but they weren't popular like these kind of games, or they weren't cracking top 10 or top 25 lists. So
AAAs seem to be bigger breaks between the AAA releases.
Well, of course.
It seemed like during, let's say, the Trump years. I mean, you can correlate that however you want, but when the economy was hot, it seems like AAAs were pushing out as fast as possible. And now they're really spread out. I mean, AAA titles aren't coming out very often, other than ones that are kind of annual and then a release here and there that's been being worked on for years. That can't, what are they going to do? Not to release because it's not good right now. I mean, they're still going to release. They've got to release. They can't keep hiring people. So I think, but we're going to be seeing, I think, the impacts of this for a while. Because right now things are really bad. Studios aren't developing things right now as the way they should. Well, that's going to last for years, the impact of this. And that's going to be the frustrating part, because next year we're not going to get the hot releases. The year after that, we're not going to get the hot releases until the economy starts to recover and they decide to put money into development again.
Yeah. It is, it's a staggering effect with this stuff. You don't build a video game overnight. Many developers say that they can, but of course they don't. And it doesn't. Anybody that says that they do,
I mean, a good game takes years to make. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Or you go through the, the early access rigmarole of releasing your half-finished game, and then pray to Christ that you get enough money to continue to fund the development and hope that your player base is still there by the time your development is done. I mean, those are the two cycles that you're essentially in.
It seems like that's gone away a lot. I haven't.
Yeah, because everybody got screwed.
Early access is teasing about early access. And a lot of the ones that got early access kind of dwindled before they even got to release. And I think that's what this industry kind of figured out. Sure, you can do early access. You'll get a few people playing it, but you'll never, I mean, most of those didn't make it to release in the last couple of years. So, or some of them are doing this huge, long development cycle, to where they're not, I mean, I'm trying to remember, there was that game that I just installed on my computer, but it was, it was one of those survival games that was hot and teased. I kickstarted it and then nothing. It's just like they finally put out their first beta, Dead Matter. That's right. I mentioned it a week or two ago, but they put out their first playable test, that was really considered beta here last week. How long ago were we talking about that game? I mean, I feel like it was years ago that we were talking about that game.
Well, I can find out. We'll use the handy dandy search feature on infectionpodcast.com. And we talked about it August 8th, 2017. We did episode 134. The title was, in fact, Dead Matter at the time. Let's see what we...
So,
let's pull
that's
this,
6-7 years ago.
Let's see what's going on.
And they finally, I kickstarted it, and they finally have put out a version that I can play. 6 or 7 years. I mean, why would I want to kickstart anything else?
Look like a freaking child.
You were.
I'm not playing that. I did live in North Carolina, though. I just moved here. Huh.
But this is the perfect example of what killed this type of not release, and finally put something out by the time the whole hype.
Oh, actually, we did an interview with the Dead Matter guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, and it's been that long, and they're finally putting out something.
But see, and so that's exactly the point. And what I was getting to was, those are your two. Those are essentially your. Well, there's 3 cycles. You either have a big cash cow or a huge influx of cash to start, where you can afford development. Those are very rare. The second is you rush something to early access, which I don't have a problem with. I mean, this is how a lot of software is. A lot of companies, especially new tech startups, it's first to market, quick to get out the door, we'll clean it up on the backside. The only difference is with software versus video games. A lot of times that software is purchased by other companies, right? Because you'll come out with a killer concept, and then some tech company globbers you up for a couple $100,000 and you're out, and then they work on the product. That doesn't happen in video games. So then you release and then you slowly iterate, but the cash isn't typically enough to build up quickly. So you get this very long, in the case of Dead Matter, 6-year essentially difference in delay between when your things are talked about versus when they're ready to be played, and your audience is no longer there. I mean, who is at the time, our whole community at the time, that when we were doing the survival podcast, everybody was beating out the door for Dead Matter. That's all. That was it looked freaking crazy.
It was going to be the next huge game.
Yeah.
But the problem is, you can come up with something that has kind of cool looking effects in the beginning, and I think I said this at the time, if I remember correctly. It's a whole different thing when you start trying to make it multiplayer. You can make a little video that shows all these cool things, but when you need to make it work with up to 100 players, that's something else. And you start having to cut out things, because these people generally don't have the experience to optimize it like a huge AAA studio can. They don't have the people working on each little individual piece. And so you have to start taking features out. And here, I haven't really played the game yet, but I'm sure it's not all the stuff that they hyped it up to be back, 6 years ago now. They probably have taken quite a bit out to get it out the door.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the case.
Because otherwise, why would it take them this long to get something that's playable?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the news on old Starfield making a splash in the pond, not only on the new sales standpoint, but I think kind of shows a greater conversation, or brings forward the greater concern about the video game industry and just the status of it as a whole.
Yeah. Well, here, I want to talk a little bit. Well, do you want to talk about Sony, or do you want to talk about deep fakes? Because they're both.
Let's start with Sony. We should be able to bang the Sony one out pretty quickly.
All right. Well, there was this, and it happened a number of weeks ago, but they had a ransomware attack happen at Sony. And it did. They got access to some 6,000 files, according to ransom.vc, and they weren't talking about it for a while, but they're working to sell this data. Sony did not want to pay the data, so they're going to be selling it.
They didn't.
And so this will be interesting to see, what kind of leaks and things we start to get. I'm sure that they're asking a pretty penny for it, and I don't know how damaging this data actually is, but this is something that there probably is pretty big, I would assume. There says it's going to be a bunch of documents, build logs, Java resources, HTML data. A lot of them are in Japanese, so who knows?
No game code.
It could be that it's really not anything crazy, and so the price isn't that low. But of course, Sony's not talking about what's actually there.
Sure.
So I thought this was interesting. We'll have an article on it if you want to dig into and try to figure out more.
Can I say
that
this,
is something
though?
that, yeah.
If this was games, 6,000 files is not a lot. An uncompiled game is tens of thousands of files. This is likely just business documents, which obviously are still not good.
Well, if it's build logs, it could be the compiling logs. It could be just something.
But again, who cares?
It doesn't have the actual data, but it has information about what happened.
Here's my build log code.
I know.
Spooky. I mean, I don't really know.
I mean, yeah, the thing that they'd more be worried about, something that would be a big deal if if there was something released that allowed people to hack into the PlayStation to break it, pretty much do a jailbreak of the PlayStation. That would be a big deal. And I'm guessing that's not.
No, if it was, they'd pay the ransom on it. The fact that it's not, they're not, and the
they
fact
probably
that nobody,
know exactly what it was.
And by the way, this happened last month, and the fact that nobody has purchased it yet and released it indicates that there's nothing worth purchasing in there. Because if this was really such a big thing, this data would have already been published.
Yeah, and that's probably part of the issue. Is it's not anything worth purchasing. Another thing, there was a ex-PlayStation boss, and he was talking about, of course, part of this I think is in response to Microsoft, but he said he has a warning for the game industry.
Oh, okay.
And he says he worries about consolidation and game preservation. Now, consolidation, what they mean are, I think, Google, Netflix, Amazon, Apple getting into this sector, and he calls them barbarians at the gate. I thought that was kind of an interesting. He says that this consolidation is kind of an enemy of creativity, which it can be.
That's true.
I guess it really depends on, because a lot of times Google isn't innovating. They're just getting it and releasing it, right? Giving you access to the same things. Apple, same thing. Netflix, same thing. Netflix will be interesting because they're just getting ready to release this online gaming portion of it. I saw a note there that only 1% of Netflix users play games daily, which is kind of odd. I don't know if they're not considering that as mobile games. That seems pretty low to me.
That seems like an inaccurate number. There's no way. I mean, there's the crossover's got to be more than 1% is a statistical error.
Yeah, because 1% just seemed like, to me, it was really low. But that's they're claiming less than 1% of Netflix users play games daily. So that's out of the 247.15 million subscribers.
That's absolute BS.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe they're trying to downplay it, but that's from GameIndustry.biz. But who knows? Maybe they're being very specific on their numbers to make it seem like that. But I do think so. But I think they're more of taking a swipe at Microsoft, and I think Microsoft's going to do very well with Activision Blizzard. I think they're going to allow them to continue to operate just like they've allowed Bethesda to continue to release games. I don't think it's going to be a negative impact. I think he's more trying to just say that, somehow Microsoft's deal is a negative thing against this whole deal.
Well, if now this guy's not with Sony, but he spent a lot of his career at Sony. Anymore. If you're Sony, Brian, you would see this as a negative deal. I mean, this to you is a negative deal. But the reality is all of these claims about end of competition and everything, none of this stuff has been substantiated. Nobody has been able to point and show in instances. And I mentioned this way long ago. I couldn't even tell you how, well over a year and a half ago. If this turns out to be the disaster that everybody's making it out, it will cost Microsoft dearly. I mean, if they really do screw with this, and it really is this whole thing that everybody's again crying and complaining about, then yes, that will be the case. I just really don't see possible. Microsoft's a big company. There's a lot of stupid people making decisions that don't know what they're talking about. It's possible. I just don't think I wouldn't gamble on it. I wouldn't place a bet that they're going to screw it up.
Yeah. Well, here I have a quote from him. Here's what he says. My concern around consolidation is that often it impacts creativity. For instance, it takes some kind of small independent wild horse studios and brings them in a larger conglomerate, and essentially time slows down. The bigger you are, time slows down. He says, I'm concerned when studios get bought, and instead of enabling a way to create their game, they maybe get absorbed into a larger enterprise that's making a larger game. How many studios are involved in making blockbuster games that will stagger the mind. And this is something that's not what Activision Blizzard is doing. They didn't buy a small studio.
But hold on a second. Microsoft is not acquiring your game without your permission. You're selling it to them. So why is Why is the fault on the conglomerate? If you're a creative and you're trying to rush your game out and you're trying to do all these things, why are you selling your game to Microsoft anyway? Now, yes, they might be dangling a bunch of cash in front of you. I'm sure that's lucrative, but they're not holding a gun to your head and saying, if you don't purchase this game, it's going to be the end of you. That to me seems, that's almost like victim blaming. In some regards, these guys are purchasing a product. Now that it's their product, it is going to be a little bit different versus 3 guys in a basement making a video game versus working around a team of engineers and software developers and product managers and marketing and all this other stuff. Yes, it is going to be a slower process. Yeah. I mean, that is just the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. You're selling your game. If you don't want to be bogged down by the corporate BS, then don't sell it.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
See if it's successful.
It's a trade-off, Brian. You know what? You don't want to be in the larger conglomerate. Then don't. Then you're going to have to deal with the financial struggles of being a small proprietary studio. Some people might take that gamble. Others are going to sell it. This guy is an idiot.
And he says that in specific instances, acquisitions can save studios from shutting down, and he's glad to see that. But, he says he's worried about the lasting impact of the larger trend.
Then stop selling your stuff.
He says when you go from hundreds of voices to dozens of voices, you lose some voices. What's that even mean?
This guy sounds like he's just anti-big business.
Dozens of voices. Yeah. Sounds like he's it sounds like he's bitter that Sony's not been doing well in the acquisition. I mean, Sony acquired Bungie, and that was like their big acquisition. Bungie makes one game. Destiny.
Well, Brian, take a look at his Twitter bio. I mean, that might,
he's a citizen. So when they're a citizen
from San Francisco. So I guess I'll lay my case. That is my exhibit for the case. The defense rests its case, Brian. Yeah.
All right, so that's Sony, of course, being bitter and angry still.
I have to say, I really can't comprehend. I really am struggling, struggling hard to comprehend the point trying to be made. When you get purchased by a large company, the process slows down.
How did that go down to hundreds of voices turning into dozens of voices? You lose voices. How is being bought by a bigger company? That gives you more voices of people giving input.
Yeah, but your voice means less, Brian. It's no longer a small company, and that is true. What he's saying is not incorrect.
The managers are getting the voices, no longer all the individuals. Is probably
that's true. That's how business operates. Yeah. I'm sorry, we don't rule in a our society doesn't work on mob rule, contrary to what the left wants.
But when you sell your game, you also lose the gamble of the possibility of it going big and you making big money. But you get a consistent paycheck.
Correct. And that's
folks, where your voice goes.
Absolutely. And that is a trade-off that is made independently by all of these companies at the time that this is an option for them. And by the way, how often are you seeing Microsoft or these other companies going and purchasing small indie games?
Very rarely.
Very rarely. Yeah. I mean, look at all of the indie games that we've discussed, that we've talked about on this show for the last, was it Brent Bryan, like 16 years have been doing this, something like that. How many of those have been acquired by the big studios? None. Yeah. H1Z1, Ark, Conan Exiles. Well, actually, Conan did get purchased by somebody, but it wasn't huge. They've been purchased by different investment groups. None of these things have been gobbled up by Sony, Bethesda, Bungie, Activision. None of them, because they're too small fish. Like they don't even waste their time with it.
And they don't have groundbreaking technology that they're purchasing them for.
No, exactly. These games are just built off of engines that everybody has access to.
I mean, one of the only ones that really happened to a long time ago was Minecraft. Really look at
But that was at the time like pretty unbelievable.
That was one guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he had technology and he had a concept that no one had done yet. That's what they bought. And in the fact that he had got a ton of sales from it.
Well, but
purchasing all those sales.
When did he sell Minecraft? They were already.
It's got to be like 10 years ago. I feel like.
Let's see.
And he had been selling it on his website.
Yeah, for forever. I mean, that's where I bought it. Let's see. Where is development? Microsoft.
So
in
you're looking at
2014.
From, so I was pretty close. Said 10 years ago, right?
Yeah. So, but you're talking about a game that had been out since 2009 by, let's see, by 2011, the game had already sold over 100 million copies. I mean, that is not a small game. I mean, by this point, you already had a rave
But it was a
success.
small I mean, it was one guy making.
Well, it was a couple
right?
guys. Yeah, it was Jeb and Notch that were essentially.
And so, yeah, they pretty much made it. And that's one of those cases where, sure, they did go and buy it. But, you know, they became successful before that. It wasn't
Correct.
a struggling development studio.
And not just successful, incredibly successful. Like an unbelievable story of success and wealth.
Yep. Yeah.
Those are the kinds of games.
I think that's the case where they'll come in and buy you, but we haven't seen one of those for a while.
No, because those
a group of guys come in with that groundbreaking of technology that they're like, well, we need to buy that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at some of the hot things, and even outside of traditional video games, looking at mobile and some other things like that, you're just not seeing as much of that. I mean, the last big hot game would be Fortnite, and that, of course, is already owned by Epic, so there's nobody to purchase that. Nobody is purchasing Epic. Yep. Tim Sweeney's not selling. Even games that seemed popular, like Realm Royale, which were relatively popular. How popular? Not popular enough for any of these.
Now they got a couple, maybe 100 people playing it right now.
Literally,
they're not going to buy it for that case.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, hey, let's talk. I want to talk before we end the show about deep fakes, because this is something that I've had in the show notes here for a couple of weeks, talking about a bill that they're talking about would criminalize what they call extremely harmful online deep fakes. Now, what that means, kind of hard to say, but they said, you know, this sends a signal to bad actors that they won't get away with deceiving. And this kind of makes me nervous, because it treads a little bit on free speech, you know, to a point. Where's the line? It makes me nervous of I can understand why they'd be worried about deepfakes, because you can get people really riled up, and you can create a lot of fake news with deepfakes, because technology's gotten so good, it's hard to differentiate sometimes what's real. But what really kind of cemented it for me is just this, in the last couple of weeks, there was an IT company that got breached because they deep faked an employee's voice. Now, this is where it becomes dangerous. So, Retool says social engineering, AI deepfake.
I've used them.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
And the AI deepfake and a weakness in Google's Authenticator app helped the hacker breach the company last month. This isn't a small company. This Retool is a very well known. You know, it's a software development company.
It's a WYSIWYG
software development tools.
It's a very easy WYSIWYG software development thing. Very powerful. I've used it. I have a premium subscription.
It's used by large companies. It's used by OpenAI, Amazon, Stripe, Unity, Plaid, Fox. I mean, there's a big list of all Pinterest.
It's great for
Taco Bell.
For internal apps. You're building an internal app. It's very easy to build on Retool. Absolutely.
So this breach ensnared 27 cloud customers, and it occurred last month at Retool. And so the hacker kicked off the intrusion by sending several employees a Retool SMS-based text message that claimed to come from a member of Retool's IT team, who are reaching out to resolve a payroll issue, preventing employees from receiving healthcare coverage. Most Retool employees who received the phishing message refrained from responding, except for one. This person clicked the URL in the message, which forwarded them to a fake internet portal to log in. After logging into the portal, which included a multi-factor authentication form, the hacker called the employee while using an AI-powered deepfake. The caller claimed to be one of the members of the IT team and deepfaked our employee's actual voice.
Jesus.
How they did that, pretty interesting. The voice was familiar with the floor plan of the office, coworkers, and internal processes of the company. Throughout the conversation, the employee grew more and more suspicious, but unfortunately did provide the attacker one additional multi-factor authentication code. So,
wow.
Here, I mean, this was kind of a little bit of an attack where they had some internal knowledge, but then they used some of these tools so they had to know where they could talk about people in the company.
Sure.
They had to somehow get the voice of this. I assume that they did some sort of a support call, recorded it, or had some way. I mean, for me, they could come to this podcast, record,
easily,
or play to train off of all of our recordings, and then be able to fake my voice. So it could be a similar situation like that where they just somehow had access to an employee's audio. Maybe they stream on Twitch or have a YouTube channel. Who knows? But somehow they got that employee's voice and were able to have a convincing enough to be able to string them along for a little while. And here they were able to compromise the Google account and the MFA codes and get into and get access to some of the internal systems at Retool. So I can understand that. Now, there are plenty of other crimes that you can charge them with, not so much the deep fake part of it, because they broke laws outside of that. It's just not a deep fake. So I don't know that I want a law that's going to try to solve this problem, because this problem is something totally different. This having a fake email, impersonating someone else, and then getting into systems that you're not supposed to. There's plenty of charges they can bring without trying to create a law about deepfakes. My concern with deepfakes is somebody creating a meme that then people then go after them and charge them and take, possibly send them to prison for a meme. Are they going to make it to where you have to label something as a deep fake, put some sort of a watermark, something to show that it's fake? I mean, what are they going to do to try to solve this? Because where's the line to too real? Because there's parody and then there's a deep fake. Where's the line in between parody and deep fake? You can create a cartoon about somebody, right?
Yeah, you could.
How real can you make it before it crosses this line? I don't know where that line is, and how are they going to, in law, decide where that line is? That's what makes me nervous.
It is a problem that I don't have an answer to, and I'm not sure that anybody has an answer to until we get, a little bit of on-the-job training, Brian. Until we get far enough down the path, I don't know that we're going to have a solution. I don't think a watermark is the solution. I mean, again, then you're putting it on the onus of the individuals making it to do that. And of course, if you're a bad actor trying to infiltrate a company, you're obviously not going to do that. That wouldn't make any sense. It would blow your cover. So,
well, and Google's announced earlier this month that it's going to require all verified election advertisers to clearly disclose any use of synthetic media, that's what they call it, that makes it appear as if a person is saying or doing something they did not say or do.
Now, that's
Additionally, any ads that use AI to alter footage of real events or generate a realistic scene must be clearly labeled according to the platform. Now, if you want to see an example of this, remember, what's the one about, is it convicting I'm trying to remember. There's one that was recently put out with that political girl who, I don't remember where she works at, but convicting a killer. There's the one that was put out that's about that whole about that guy killing the girl on the from Auto Trader. Did you remember ever watching that on Netflix?
I have no freaking idea what you're talking about. No.
Hold on, let me get the convicting a murderer. So there was that's the new one, but there was Making a Murderer on Netflix. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've never watched it, but
okay. So Making a Murderer was a whole documentary about Stephen Avery. Sorry, it's coming back to me now that I'm having to think of numbers.
Old timers, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody. This is an old timers moment brought to you by Infection Podcast. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
So Making a Murderer was a documentary put out by Netflix where they were talking about this case where supposedly this guy was framed, and they did a whole set of things that got people in an uproar because they felt like the police they framed this guy. It was based on this documentary. He ended up getting convicted and is spending a lot of time in prison. Well, what's her name? So she's a black girl who's a political.
Candace Owen?
For her name, Candace Owens. Yes,
oh.
She put out a documentary recently called "Convicting a Murderer," where she goes through and kind of just covers that whole case and shows all the places where they were dishonest in that documentary. So if you're going to claim that this is the case, you're going to have to start going after people like that because they edited courtroom testimony and spliced it to make it look like people were saying things that they weren't. So if you're going to go after these deepfake people, you're going to have to go after people like that. Well, because where's the line going to end?
Well, and see, and that's the problem with this, Brian. This is like, for example, you've had the Alec Murdoch, who the South Carolina lawyer that killed his wife and son. There's a there's a little Netflix series about it. I don't remember what it's called. It's very good. But
there's one like Staircase that was kind of similar where they went through the whole case. In the end, you're kind of like, did he do it? Did he not do it? I don't really know.
The point is, so it's not even an issue, but this is really what it comes down to. So you're watching this Netflix documentary about Alec Murdoch and Buster and all this stuff. It makes them look like complete and total scumbags. Are they complete and total scumbags? Well, this guy was convicted of murdering his wife and son, so yes. But it's, of course, all of the staging and framing is meant from a negative standpoint. They show his son to be a raging alcoholic with no responsibility. I mean, this is not something new. This is how you frame or stage something. And this is a term that you would know that you're very familiar with, and everybody should be: bias. And if you're coming at something with a bias in it, like to point out that somebody is this or is that, I mean, you could clip my radio show every morning, pull me out of context, and claim that I am a terrible, awful, evil, racist person based on my radio show. That wouldn't be hard. You could probably do it on this podcast too. I mean, context is very important. And when you strip out the context, when you don't include the full context, this happens all the time. Even on television news, you'll see a clip of somebody making an 8-second quote. Of course.
That they said, talk about making it appear as if a person is saying or doing something they didn't do.
That's exactly the case.
All
Mexicans are rapists. That's not what he said.
Yeah, that's not what he said. And so if you're going to start going after people like that, then you're going to have to go after the news media. Where's this going to end? Because this is making it to where they're saying, hey, we're going to go after these things right here. Well, the problem is there's no way to differentiate to some point to something that is currently happening now that we're not prosecuting. Like, are you going to start going after news media for misrepresenting? Because that's really what you're hinting at, is the misrepresenting. You're trying to create law for someone misrepresenting or insinuating or trying to make it look like someone did something they didn't. Well, that happens on a daily basis, right and left of the political spectrum. Sure. It's not one side doing this. Where are you going to, who's going to define what truth is? That's the problem we've been running into in the last, 5 years? 7 years? Yeah, Snopes, who loves to put out misinformation on a weekly basis. I mean, this is, I think, one thing that's become very apparent is that these people that claim to, fact check things are the most biased people you've ever seen in the whole system. One thing I do appreciate about X now is the fact that they have those community notes.
Yes,
I think
huge.
That's been something that has made a huge difference because Snopes is incredibly biased. These new news medias who are all about fact checking President Trump it showed their bias constantly. Do make it to where these systems are more like what Elon Musk did, because there you have people on both sides of the political spectrum that have to come to an agreement of how that is defined based on facts. So people have to show their research, show the facts, and then both sides have to kind of vote on it and say, hey, okay, here's a way that we can make a community note about this topic. And it doesn't always look good for one side or the other. But they're usually not super biased. So this just makes me nervous. I understand with specific deep fakes, But when they say then splicing things or somehow altering things, well, that's called editing. And if you're saying that if someone edits a video to make it look like someone says something, that happens every day in the news. Are you going to prosecute them? I have a feeling you're not. So, where's this going to end? And are you going to go after specific companies? You're going to, now it's not so much Fox, but you're going to go after Newsmax now?
Hey, I was on
doing
Newsmax.
All of this. I know, but that's who they're going to go after. They're not going to go after ABC and NBC. They're going to go after the people that they don't agree with. And that's where I get more worried about this. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that is a problem with or without AI. It becomes potentially more of a problem with AI. There's going to be no source material.
And this is a Democrat from New York pushing this. So this is what makes me worry.
Yeah. I guess the benefit of the way that it's done now, not that it's a benefit, but normally the full clip is available for context. If you wanted to go and say, well, that doesn't sound right, I can go back and find, where did this come from? Yeah. Oh, that's not what she said. When it's generated by AI or it is a true deep fake, there is not going to be that source material. The only version of the comment that will exist will be the fake one, which is going to make it
and that's the thing,
really hard to debunk.
Make a law where
things.
perhaps make a law where they have to keep a link to the unedited version if you're going to splice something. Now, if you're just going to cut, I mean, that becomes difficult because, how do you determine what's the beginning and the end of a clip?
Yeah, exactly.
If it's something that's huge.
I can tell you this.
I do recommend you go check out that Candace Owens documentary, Convicting a Murder. I think you'd really enjoy it because it opens your eyes a lot to how much manipulation they did in the original documentary.
Sure. And, of course, the goal is salation, views, and all that other stuff.
They want to get people worked up. But this is a murder trial they're getting people worked up about.
Sure. I can tell you this, though. I don't think law is going to be the solution to this problem long term.
Yeah.
Any sort of regulation is not going to be the solution to this long term. Now, I will say this, from a political advertising standpoint, there are very strict rules already with these things. To run political ads on Facebook, you have to verify yourself. You have to go through a Facebook verification process. It's the same thing on these other platforms, and that I'm actually grateful for that. Those are done by those platforms. It keeps the people that are just trying to spin up troll accounts and run political ads. It boxes them out, which is great. But that's not because of any law. They're doing that for their own protection, as they should.
Yeah. Well, and DeSantis, I mean, here recently, DeSantis, you remember he was putting out those videos that ended up having edited and deep fake and things slipped into there. And I don't know, personally, I don't know if that's necessarily him doing that on purpose. I don't think he's that savvy. I think it was someone on his team.
Sure. Well, it's still his responsibility.
It's still his responsibility, but and I remember that he had fired some people or let some people go because of these type of things. But that's going to be an ongoing issue. I mean, especially with Trump. Trump sees something, he's going to retweet it, or he's going to put it on Truth Social if he thinks it's entertaining, and then he's going to end up coming up in court later about it. And that's going to be the crazy thing. Like, at what point can he share a deep fake just because he thinks it's funny? Does he have to label it as a deep fake? Make it to where if it's a deep fake and it's a deep fake, you just have to say this is a fake. Kind of like with the accounts, you have to say parody on X.
Sure.
Right? Have similar rules. You have to announce that it's parody, or maybe not. It's meant to be a joke, but that it's somehow not a real clip. All right. Do you want to talk a little more about crime, or do you want to? Talk a little bit more about Microsoft. It's up to you.
Let's stay on crime. I think we're about Microsoft out. Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to mention here really quick. There was a Japanese court convicted this guy who had released some video clips and spoilers, and he is ending up getting 2 years in. I don't know if it's jail or prison over there. But these were spoilers that he released. He got a 1 million yen fine and 2 years in prison. So it's this 52-year-old guy from Japan. He got arrested for copyright law. which is pretty standard. He went to court over this, and he ended up being found guilty. He admitted to the charges here in August, and then he was sentenced in September. And he said, he had admitted, he said, I knew it was illegal and as I was doing it, but this is something where 2 years and a 5-year suspended sentence on top of that. So if he doesn't do,
it's a pretty significant.
It could be could doodle a total of 7 years in prison.
Yeah, that's the
equivalent of about a $7,000 fine, just under $7,000. And this is the first time someone's been found guilty of copyright violations involving distributing video games. So kind of a new thing here. I was surprised, that is quite a lot of prison time for copyright violation. It's not like he was running a big pirating site. Those guys, sometimes the founders of Pirate Bay and things like that can get a lot of time. But this guy was just releasing spoilers on YouTube. And, how we got them is probably part of the issue. But is this going to be the kind of standard going forward? Because now the precedence has been set. Now, of course, this is Japan, not the United States. I'm interested to see if they're going to continue prosecuting people because, if they've had GTA spoilers that have been put out, those guys seem to go and try to prosecute people that do that. But I've not seen someone get like 7 years of possible jail time for something like
Neither have I. Don't read the comments on the PC Gamer article from somebody with the same name as me. Not me, I promise. Intellectual property law is universally awful and needs to be dismantled everywhere. It's a very high IQ individual. Just get rid of all intellectual property.
Well, that's the communist socialist point of view. And that's, we got a lot of PC Gamer readers who believe in that type of thing.
If you had no intellectual property law, you would have no content. There would be no financial benefit.
There would be no motivation.
Content. Yes.
Why would you
produce something
if immediately gets stolen and someone else puts out and sells for you?
Makes
all the money off of it.
Like all these guys that sit in their room and watch Crunchyroll all day, and are
everything should be free, man.
Married to their waifu body pillow. Their whole lives revolve around this content. All of this stuff dries up the second that a content creator can't protect his or her work, and the second that they can't profit off it. Because here's the crazy, Brian. All right, okay. We're a little late into the show, so it's a little loopy here. It's 8:00. I'm gonna make a crazy statement here on the air, Brian. I don't might be the end of the show forever. It turns out it costs money to produce content, so you sell it to recuperate that money to pay your employees and to produce more of that same content. I know that's wild. I know that's an old school, supremacy, chauvinistic thought. But that's turns out that's the case. So if you get rid of intellectual property law, you will have no content at all because it won't make any sense to produce anything. You won't be able to make any money on it.
How many open source games are people playing? A lot of people playing.
Nobody.
Can you think of any?
No. Minesweep open source?
I don't think so.
Okay,
but there are ones that are open source. But you don't want to know the beauty of that is people hack it because they have open access to the code and they create hacks, and you can't play any online games that are open source because there's so many cheaters. Also, the things that are open source, which kind of these guys will use as an example to say, see, software should be free. Well, these are things for business uses, which are supporting businesses, and then they end up getting donations and support from companies to make the open source go forward. So it is ending up being that business and copyright and all these things are what allow open source to work.
But even open source has licensing. Open source still has terms.
But there's some licensing that's very open.
Yes, but like whatever the regular open source standard is, GPNU or whatever, if the name escapes me right now. Brian, you can't put something on GitHub. I can't take that GitHub product and then
like
start
the MIT or the Apache. There's the MIT, Apache, GNU.
Whatever those standard ones are. I can't take your product and then call it my product and then start selling it. That license does not allow that. I cannot do that.
But I can't sell it, but I can sometimes take yours, change it, kind of relabel it.
Sure.
And give it away for free still.
but
I'm not going to be making money off of it.
But I couldn't take your product and then call it Brian's awesome application, call it Nick, just change it to Nick's awesome application, and then start charging businesses for it. That would not be legal.
Yes. That would break the license. Yeah. So there's still
Correct.
a license to it. There are restrictions.
Yes,
but here,
as there should be.
When you look at software licenses, there's still money being fed into these things. Apache doesn't run for free.
Apache makes a whole bunch of stuff, by the way.
Apache runs some of the biggest websites, a majority of the websites, but some of the other pieces of I use Apache as an example, some of the other pieces to that are what run the giant corporations of the world. So there's money funneling into Apache. Apache somehow makes money. I don't know how much money Apache makes. It'd be interesting to see up here Apache. Do they show? I'm wondering how much income they make.
I don't see it on their Wikipedia.
Okay, here we go. Apache current revenue in 2022 was $9.16 billion. This is an open source software company. You're telling me that everything's free, man, at Apache? No, it's not. There's a lot of money being funneled into these open source free. So when it comes to saying everything has to be free, that's not how it works. Open source works because of companies that make money, that have a lot of copyrights and everything else behind them, or products or services. People like to use that to try to say, okay, look, see, communism works, socialism works. Look at open source software. Look at how much money's running in the background. There's a lot. That's just
look
one
at
company.
Look at all the great socialistic and communistic inventions in world history.
Oh yeah, works great.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
And
great...
their closest thing they can bring is still working Afro capitalism.
Correct.
A mixture of those type of concepts and capitalisms works great. Open source software works great, but it needs capitalism to work. If we didn't have capitalism behind open source software, there would be no open source software, at least no good open source software.
Yeah, well, Brian, as this guy as he opens this thing, I've been saying this for years. It's time to end intellectual property. So, I guess he's right. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, and he shouldn't have a login to his bank account, because that's something he's hiding behind a restriction and a rule, man. Of course, the guy probably doesn't have any money anyways. So
no, you're right. Yeah. Well, he's commenting on a PC Gamer article, so I mean, he
doesn't have a job.
They're not sending their best, Brian. They're not sending their best.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we roll on out of here?
I think we are good to go.
All right. Well, if you want to find me, you can find me at Boise Computer on X, or if you want to go to at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, Truth Social, wherever. Of course, if you go to my blog, biteoftech.com, there's a way to contact me on there. Or if you go to our Discord on infectionpodcast.com, there's a way that you can get a hold of Nick or I, or possibly you want to play one of our 11 ARC servers that are currently running, or perhaps you just want to join into the politics discussion. We got that there. And we also have a place for a show news channel. If you want to put a link in there, something you think we should be looking at or discussing on the show, put a link in that channel and we'll review it before the live show happens. If you want to go to one of our live feeds, that's on Twitch or YouTube, or after the fact, we upload a video to Rumble. If you want to listen to the show, you can do that at the lower right-hand side, and we've got lots of platform devices and ways to listen to the podcast form of our show. If you are going to be doing that, that means we have the particular episode's show notes already loaded on the website. There's a video and audio player built into that page, and then links for everything that we discussed through that particular episode. So if you're going to be doing that, it's a great way to maybe find a video or kind of have a little deeper dive into one of the topics we discussed. If you want to support our show, you can go to the support menu option up top, or you can go to infectionpodcast.com/support.
Brian, as always, greatly appreciated. We will catch up with you next week. Thanks as always. Alrighty, folks, that's going to do it. You can check me out on Twitter, X, at Nicholas M. Craig. You can check out my daily podcast. It's called Wilmington's Morning News. You can find it on your podcast app or visit nickcraig.com. As Brian noted, if you missed any portion of the show, I encourage you to go check out our show notes. They're on our website, infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.